I don't think there was a definitive moment when I decided to become an artist or even an abstract artist. Growing up through school, I was always interested in art, and I was always taught to try and find a career and pursue a career in something that I have a real passion and love for. So throughout my school years, art was the main thing for me, and it was originally more in a traditional sense where drawing and painting was what my interests were. Growing up with a dad who's a carpenter, obviously I've grown up around tools and woodwork, so it was always there and it was always an influence for me. And I remember when I was, I don't know, maybe at a sensible age to start using tools, so maybe about 14 or 15, in a woodwork class, we was given the task of making a childhood toy. So I ended up making a chameleon that had a mechanism that went in and out, and that was the first stage where making became important for me. It wasn't until I was at Wimbledon College of Art studying for my degree that I began to formulate my ideas and draw upon both my interest in art and for making. And at the time I was looking very much at Chuck Close, so I was working from images and gridding them out and categorising the tones. So I'd set myself maybe 6 tones, with 1 being the lightest, 6 being the darkest, and these tones ended up kind of like pixelating and formulating the image. I'd then transfer the picture that I had onto a larger canvas or board, and the pieces, what I really liked from them and what still inspires my work to this day is the way the viewer responded to the pieces, and you had to step back and maybe squint or stand in a certain perspective to actually visualise the actual piece itself and resolve what the image was. And I got to the stage where I wanted to start to progress and develop the process further, and the more I'd done that, the more the image was getting lost. It was becoming a bit of a battle, really. So I started to question whether I even needed the image. So instead of using an image, I decided to totally scrap the image and resort to working with shapes and different forms. So what I decided to do, I've created linear compositions which then generated a bunch of forms and shapes, and instead of manually categorising each tone, I decided to either categorise the size of the shapes, or maybe in a certain composition I'd have every shape that has 3 sides would be yellow, every shape with 4 sides may be red, and that was kind of the first stepping stage where I could really play with the process and disregard the actual imagery that I was working with. So relating to the question of when did I want to become an abstract artist, it was kind of a progression that kind of led me there and was a way of combining both my passion for art and for making. The actual making and the process kind of lended itself to working in an abstract manner. In relation to how I generate my ideas, I take a huge influence from the previous works that I've made. So some may be generated from different puzzles or board games, some may be generated from nature. Maybe one piece I've recently completed, Shepherd's Delight, was just looking at an evening sky and how the colours form and kind of manoeuvre around, and that was kind of the starting point for that. But the importance of working manually is key to my practice, and in doing so I spend a lot of time with each piece and I'm at every stage of the process, and that allows me to generate possibly 5 to 10 future pieces, so I can figure out where the next stage is going to go to. I also like to test the boundaries and do something new, try and do something different to keep myself engaged with the work that I'm making. So when I'm coming towards the end of one of the pieces, I'll look back and look at all of my sketchbooks, which I keep close to hand, and maybe the next piece might be a combination of 4 or 5 previous pieces, and it's kind of an ongoing journey. I like to see the progression and see how pieces from maybe 2 years ago still influence the work that I'm currently making now. When I'm starting a new piece, I always usually try and make a small little test piece, just so I know how the piece, I don't necessarily know how it's going to look in the end because it's on a different scale, but for example, for a screw piece, this is the next piece I'm actually going to be working on. The base is sprayed and then obviously screwed in, and then the top level is also sprayed. So these small little maquettes are actually fundamental for me to decide what works and what doesn't. So they decide what I will be making in a way. I don't just jump straight into a piece and spend maybe 3-4 weeks making a piece that's not necessarily going to work. So I like to make a small sample as such. They're not always necessarily very precious to me. They're just a means to figure out what works and what doesn't.
So in that sense, they're actually quite like the traditional sketch made by an old master artist.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, old masters. I mean, it's kind of where all my work started, kind of working from in a photorealistic way from old masters, and looking at their sketches. Yeah, it's kind of the fabrication of where the work's actually resolved. So yeah, the lead up to the work's probably was also quite important to this journey of forming the final piece. I'd definitely say that my work has a connection with op artists such as Bridget Riley, although I do always try and bring something slightly different. So it definitely has the connection in the sense where there's the mathematical proportional systems that are put in place. But by incorporating the third dimension, I'm trying to bring them to somewhere slightly different, and instead of having a optical illusion that's on a flat plane, I'm trying to do something slightly different where the viewer has to manoeuvre around the piece. So similar to the work of Patrick Hughes, when viewing his work, it's amazing to actually see what you can view from a different perspective. So I recently went to a talk of his at the Flowers Gallery, and to see a large group of people walking around and all having a dialogue with the actual work is something that I really strive for, and it's quite interesting when my work's in a gallery. Someone that might walk straight into the gallery will see a piece front on and not necessarily realise that it's a three-dimensional object, yet when they're manoeuvring around the gallery, it comes to life and you can reveal the construction. So it does definitely relate to op art, but hopefully in its own way. In relation to how my work's going to progress and where I'm going to move on to next, I've recently had quite a few people comment on, because generally I work with both hand-carved wooden pieces and then also the screw pieces. People have often asked if they're two separate topics or two totally different categories of work, and they're not at all. A screw piece can most definitely inform one of the wooden constructions, even if it's something as simple as colour formation or how a screw piece can step up. It might influence the way I construct the next wooden piece. So the possibility of the next stage may be to work with screw pieces that are on different levels and try and combine the two distinct types of work and form them into one kind of body of work as such. I also want to enlarge the scale of some of the pieces just to see how they have an impact on the viewer, because obviously some of the smaller pieces, although nice and intricate, on a larger scale with the same intricacy might have a totally different impact on the way you actually view the piece. So that's something that I want to be working on. Yeah, so this piece is commonly I only usually work with two, but this one's actually got 1, 2, 3 different levels. So the composition is generated over all 3 of the layers. obviously, what I quite like about and what keeps me motivated when going through the process is because they're all separate pieces, so there's hundreds of different pieces scattered out over a board. Until it's finally constructed and finished and glued and together, it's not until it's actually hung that I actually know how the work actually is visualised. So it kind of spurs me on to keep making it, really.
Mm. So you've not really got much of an idea of what it's going to end up as?
No, I never have an idea of how the works are going to form in the end. So I don't really like to repeat myself because I know that works for me visually. So it wouldn't make sense to do it in maybe red and green. I like to try and test a new composition, or maybe even if there's only 2 colours within this piece, but maybe if I would incorporate 10 colours and have some sort of gradual fade, that would create a totally different illusion. So that's how I kind of progress. I try and move on rather than repeat what I've already done.
Could you get
so while I'm working, I always keep a sketchbook close to hand, just so any little ideas, there might even just be small little scribbles or just little ideas jotted down, because they're what are going to influence what I'm going to be making in the future. So it's key for me to record all of my thoughts in one place, ideally.
So artwork on its own right, you'd say?
In a way, yeah. I don't really view it as an artwork, but it's just as important as any of the other pieces that inform the next one. So it's definitely a key part to my practice.
And these ones, these new round, small round ones are new, aren't they? There's
Oh,
one
no,
there and there's 2 down there. I really like those.
They're old ones, so they're kind of where I start off sometimes. So they're smaller, 3-dimensional.
So they're like a maquette almost.
Yeah. So just make small little sample test pieces to see which ones work and which ones don't. And the more successful ones I then transfer into the larger works. So the ones that you're seeing there are
so
smaller.
So that's relating to that large one.
To that one, yeah. So it's kind of,
yeah,
that's a reference for that larger piece.
Yeah, I think they work very well, as a small version as well, to be honest.
Yeah. So I created the original composition. So you have the 9x9 grid, which is then in turn divided into 9 squares. And what I'd done was completed a Sudoku puzzle and transferred it over into this one. So you had, this one was just formalised as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Obviously the number 1 can get thrown all over the place in this one. So what it's created is a totally randomised composition generated from this. So it's been processed through a Sudoku puzzle, so it's given the element of chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. It makes a very nice object.
And obviously the framing's to reference a kind of puzzle book. So.